Welcome back to Risk, everyone. I'm Lee, and I have a returning guest, Rudy, Mr. Alaska Prepper. Great to have you. Great to see you again. How have you been?
Good, man. Thank you for having me, Lee. Everything's been good. I mean, I can't say the same for the world, but here in my little piece of Alaska, everything's so far so good. We're just bracing down for the storm that is to come. I've told my viewers several times that there will come a day when we will have a perfect storm, meaning a lot of little storms coming together into one perfect storm. And unfortunately, I see that day coming, and I think we're closer to it than we've ever been. Anyone that's got their eyes open and see what's going on in the world, I think would agree with that.
Well, last time you were on the show, we talked a bit about inflation, and we warned people about that it was coming. And it certainly has. I mean, we have gas up now over $4 I paid $4.70 the other day for a gallon of diesel, which is crazy.
Yeah, man. Everyone's got their own story. I think it was last Thursday, I filled up my tank at 385. Then the next morning on my way to take my daughter to school, I almost got whiplash because I saw the price on the gas station sign at 429. And then that afternoon, it was 442. And now it's 449. So incredible. And I mean, people think that this is as bad as it's going to get. Man, they better think twice. That's why I am such a big advocate of being prepared. And let me go ahead and put this out real quick for those people that are going to think that I'm a crazy doomsday prepper. I don't prep for doomsday, and neither should you. I prep for my family. I make sure that I'm prepared in every possible way that I can in order so that my family can sustain the standard of living that I've been able to give them or, provide to them over the years. That's what prepping is about. It's about getting ready for any kind of an event, not the end of the world, that's going to get you through point A to point B. That way, when the crisis or event is over, you're still whole and you don't have to start over again, I guess in a weak manner, I guess you can say, with nothing, right? You can make it through the crisis. And then when the crisis is over, because the reason the word crisis exists, it's because it's got a beginning and an end. If it didn't have a beginning and an end, then the word crisis wouldn't exist, right? Because it'd just be regular life, right? So, that's what we prepare for, is to make it through a crisis. You can call it whatever crisis you want. Some people concentrate on preparing for tornadoes, for hurricanes, for war. So if we're used to eating every day, I want to make sure that I prepare a pantry that would allow my family to eat every day for a sustained period of time. And that time can be your choosing.
Go ahead. 1 second here, because it just makes good financial sense in the type of inflationary environment we're in to stock up on things. We were just talking before we started recording. I buy a lot of beans. It's a big part of my diet. And I used to go to the wholesale store up here, and I'd buy an 8-pack of beans, and it would cost me like $4 or $5. This was a couple years ago. It's up to $9. It's almost $10 a pack now. I see that going higher and higher. You can't get that kind of return in a bank account. You might as well just buy it in something that you're going to consume and get that. I mean, it's basically an investment nowadays. Would you agree with that?
It is. And that's a great point. I often tell people, and my viewers have heard me say this several times, that if you want to invest in stock, invest in a well-stocked pantry, because this time next year, you're going to be paying, in my opinion, maybe twice as much as what you're paying now for the same foods that you are buying today. And all you have to do is go to your pantry, see if you have a can of X that you bought a year ago, remember how much you paid for it, and then go and compare how much you would pay for it today. But goodness gracious, I did a video here a while back. I do what are called payday preps. So one of the ways that I like to prepare is every payday, I go out and I do a payday prep. I give myself a budget on how much I'm going to use to go buy some preps for that payday. And I remember I like to stock up on canned chicken, and I have a Costco nearby. And from one trip to the next, the canned chicken at Costco went from being $9.98 for a 6-pack to $15.98. That is a 60% increase from one trip to the next on one item. And now there are many items that I could tell you the same thing about. We all know that oils have gone up considerably. You're talking 40, 50, 60% for cooking oils, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I went to Costco a couple of days ago. Butter went up 25%.
The list is long, Rudy. It's a very long list of everything that's going up.
Yeah, everything is going up. And, we were talking about this, and I was telling you that I think that the inflation in price that is going up now, there's a scary scenario to this, because I think it has nothing to do with all of the money printing that's been going on. And the reason is because if you take a look at the velocity of money, and for those out there that maybe don't know what the velocity of money means, it means how many times a dollar bill gets interchanged in the economy. So for example, and I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, but I do understand that some people maybe don't have the vocabulary, in finances or the economy. So that's why I'm going over this. So for example, let's say that I use $1 and I go ahead and buy a Snickers bar with that dollar. All right. The velocity of that dollar so far is 1. And then the person that sold me the Snickers bar goes and takes that dollar and he pays his light bill with it. So that's 2. Right? 2 times that dollar has been used. And then the the utility company takes that dollar and they pay the people that work for them. That's 3. And then the people spend that money to go buy another Snickers bar. That's 4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So right now, the velocity of money, the last time I checked, is almost at the lowest that it's ever been, which means that the economy is not doing very well. People aren't really spending a lot of money out there. So the inflation that we are experiencing now in the price of goods, in my opinion, all right, and I actually got this premise from the Uneducated Economist, from Simon, outstanding channel if you haven't checked them out. The inflation in prices that we're seeing now has to do with policies, right? Policies, laws, and regulations. Obviously, you've seen what's been going on here in the last couple of years, with businesses being shut down, with people not being allowed to work, et cetera. So the money is not moving around the economy the way that it normally does. It's very, very low velocity. So I think that this inflation has more to do with the policies that the administration, not only this one, but other governments have put forth, with what's going on with weather. For example, China just reported that they had their worst wheat season or wheat crop season in history, right? So that's why they've been buying up all of these grains for the last couple of years. They've been hoarding more than half of the world's grains when it comes to soybeans, corn, wheat. And they just announced that they had the worst wheat harvest in history. All right.
Well, you have to throw into that mix, Rudy, the Ukraine, because
I was just about to say that Ukraine
that's
and
a
Russia,
large
that also has made things go up. People don't understand that sanctions, they really don't hurt governments. They hurt the people. Right. And that's exactly what's happening right now. So being that we're getting all of this inflation because of all of the policy that's been enacted by fiat, understandably, we're getting all this inflation. Right. So now the scary part of this scenario is that if all of this inflation and prices has been occurring because of policies, i.e., the actions of governments, when is the inflation from the monetary supply actually going to hit us? Because eventually the inflation that the Federal Reserve has created, through the banks and through government, it's eventually going to hit the economy. And when it does, I'll tell you what, Lee, in my humble opinion, I am not an economist. I'm not even that well educated. I have a 2-year degree in general education. So do your research. But in my opinion, people are going to starve. And let me tell you why I think that is. Because what most people don't understand is that this right here, this fiat currency, which people say is money, what they don't understand is that this is a representation of your labor. This is a representation of your time. And that is why when you go and get a note at a bank, let's say, for example, for a vehicle, when you go borrow money for a vehicle in a bank, what you're doing is you're promising that bank some of your future time, some of your future labor, because it's going to take your time and your labor in order to generate this fiat currency so that you can pay back to the bank. Now, if you take a look at the world that has a debt of, I believe, close to, if not at $300 trillion already, we have borrowed so much energy from the future that I believe that when the balloon pops, we are going to have what is a liquidity problem, and it's going to be a resource problem, because we are not going to be able to resource the things we need because there is so much debt out in the economy. And people would say, I've had this conversation with friends, and they would say, well, you know, people are kind. They'll take care of each other. Let me know of one farmer. Let me know of one farmer in is it Idaho that makes the potatoes? Yeah. Like, let me know of one farmer in Idaho that gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning, goes to bed at 9 o'clock at night because he loves feeding people. Now, you may have a love for your job, but I guarantee you that if that farmer was not making a profit, he wouldn't be growing those potatoes.
Well, there's no doubt about it. You know, this reminds me of a story I heard years ago about someone growing up in a communist country. They had planted a garden in their front yard, maybe backyard, I don't remember. But the government came along after all the peppers had ripened and everything else had ripened, and they confiscated all the food. Mm-hmm. So do you think she grew a garden the next year?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. It's like they say, socialism is great until the government runs out of other people's money. Yeah. And eventually, eventually what that kind of a system does is it discourages people from being productive. And all of the productivity in your country goes elsewhere to chase greener pastures. It happens all the time.
Do you think that's part of what's been happening in this country? You know, they had all the stimulus checks and people just got lazy and they're staying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a planned demolition. It's a planned demolition of our economy. It's what it is. I've always stood by the notion that the big plan, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but all you have to do is look around and think for yourself, right? I believe that the big plan is to turn our nation into a two-tier society where you have the haves and the have-nots. And all you have to do is take a look at all of the policies that have been enacted in the last year and a half or two. And is that not what is happening? We are taking our industries and pretty much gutting them and taking the small businesses out of line. And then the sales that the small businesses had, the mom and pop shops, go to who? They go to Amazon, they go to Walmart, they go to Costco, right? Because and incidentally, those were the businesses that were allowed to stay open during the mandates that we had, you know, at the beginning of this health crisis that we had, right? Those were the ones that were allowed. Let's talk a little bit back about like what's developed or evolved over the past couple of years since we had this, whatever you want to call it. I call it health crisis. We've had that YouTube doesn't get angry at me.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we've had major supply chain issues. And those continue. They have not abated at all. I know in my business, which I'm not going to say on here, but we've had supply chain issues big time, and it's been not just my firm, but other firms have had similar issues just getting goods in from overseas. Long delays, constantly out of stock, and I know that this is prevalent in other industries. I'm sure you're seeing that up in Alaska as well.
Yeah. Well, I have to go back to what their plan is, and in my opinion, is to destroy the middle class. And let me tell you why I think that. All right, you just mentioned a lot of the problems that we had in the last couple of years: supply issues, labor issues, all of these kinds of things. For goodness sakes, we put a man on the moon, right? We've sent satellites that have actually left our solar system. We have technology that only 50 years ago, no one would have ever had believed, we would be living with today.
Well, you know what? You think back to when you were a kid and you were reading Dick Tracy and he had a little watch with his TV. I mean, that stuff's reality now.
With all of these advances in technology, right? We can't get our shipping done right. We can't get our stuff from point A to point B. So that is why I stand fast by the notion that this was a controlled demolition. Because had we wanted to, as a nation, had the policies that were passed not been passed, we would have been just fine. I did a video a while back that I had to put up on Rumble because YouTube would not allow it. And the premise of the video is I went ahead and I compared the top 5 states that during this health crisis had the most restrictions and the top 5 states that during this health crisis had the least restrictions. I compared their mortality rates. And it just happens that the top 5 states that had the least restrictions had a lower mortality rate than that of the 5 that had the most restrictions. And they continue to pass these same policies for the last couple of years. And of course, we all know that the definition of insanity is to continue to do something that doesn't work.
Yeah, they do. They never.
Will.
The leaders of these countries just never do anything to look at actually what works. They just do what's in their self-interest.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you have to scratch your head and wonder why. You know, what's their self-interest and why is it so different from ours?
Their actions have no consequences on themselves. If you were to ask yourself, and you can look back at history or look right now and see what's going on, take the worst country in the world as far as the economy goes. And right now we can look at 2 countries, actually 3 or 4, Turkey, Lebanon, Venezuela, and even Russia now. But let's take, for example, Russia, okay? People right there right now are losing purchasing power like crazy, right? And eventually, if that continues, you're going to have people losing their jobs. You're going to have people losing their homes. You're going to have people not having enough money to eat. However, if you take a look at their elite, if you take a look at their government, no one of those people that passed those policies that affected the people is actually suffering like the people are. So that is, in my opinion, why politicians, they don't really care. They don't give it a second thought. I mean, look at what they're talking about here in this country, in our White House. Well, we're going to have to, in order to be patriots now, you have to sacrifice your wealth for another country. Pretty much saying, no, don't sacrifice it for your country. If you want to be a patriot of this country, you're going to sacrifice for another country, and you and your family can go without. These politicians, they're not going without. Show me one politician right now, one senator, one congressman, the vice president or the president. Show me one of them that's going without medical attention. Show me one of them that's missing a meal. None of them are, none of them will. It doesn't matter how much gas goes up, how much natural gas goes up. Their house is still going to be warm, and they're going to still have a vehicle to drive wherever they want to drive it to, because money does not matter to them, right? They create money. So if they create money, it's just reasonable to think that they don't care about money.
Rudy, they create money and they create money and they steal money.
Well, that's exactly what that is. I mean, the creation of fiat currency is the theft of your money, which is your labor and your time.
It's basically your life. They're stealing your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think we talked about this before, that when people look at a dollar bill, they can't look at it in nominal terms. This is not a $5 bill. This represents seconds and minutes and hours of your life. Depending on how many of these you get paid per hour, that is what this represents. So whenever the government decides to allow the Federal Reserve to lower interest rate so that banks can lend out more money and bring more of these into creation and then let it go out into the economy, what they're doing is they're stealing your energy. They're stealing the purchasing power of your labor. That is what is being stolen from you. So if you go to the store to buy X, just buy that knowing how many hours of your labor that you have to give up to buy that. And then the next time that you go and it takes you more hours of your labor to buy that same item, understand that the reason that that is happening is because of the policies of the government that is in place. And it doesn't matter what side you're on, they all do it. And the reason they all do it is because they don't have a choice. Because the day that the Federal Reserve, and I'll tell you this right now, and I'll stand by this, the day that another dollar is not created into existence is the day that the entire system implodes, because we we are governed by a debt monetary system. And if we cannot continue to create more debt to infinity, the day that we cannot continue to create any more debt is the day that the system completely collapses.
I think when you pull all this together and you look at what the stated goals of the world central banks are with centralized digital currency, to me, it looks like what they're trying to do is create some sort of economic collapse and then use that to usher in these digital currencies that is basically going to control every aspect of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very smart. I mean, they're evil, in my opinion, but they're very smart. I've stated several times that we will have a CBDC, and we won't have a CBDC because it is forced upon us. We will have one because the people will beg for it, because they will end up crashing the system to a point that will generate so much pain for the average working American that eventually the people, we the people, will say, yes, I'll take whatever it is that you want to give me, just make the pain stop. We will ask for our own enslavement. And when that does happen, my opinion is that the first year or two is going to be great. When they pass the CBDC and UBI or whatever it is that they want to do, the first couple of years is going to be great, Lee. You know why? Because that's how long it's going to take them to get rid of physical cash.
Yeah.
Once they get rid of physical cash and all we have is a CBDC, our liberties are 100% gone. Get ready for at least a good decade to a generation of enslavement, pure enslavement, meaning that we will be living in what I would call an open yard prison. All right, because everything that you do will be tracked, everything that you buy will be tracked, everything that you sell will be tracked. You will be taxed on every single thing that they can possibly tax you on. And the scarier scenario is that you will only be allowed to buy or sell what they allow you to buy or sell. You will have programmable money, which is what it will be called as well, meaning that, for example, if they think that the economy needs a boost, they're going to go ahead and tell you, hey, listen, you have $1,000 in your CBDC account. If you don't spend it by the first of next month, that $1,000 is going to lose 10% purchasing power. And then if you don't spend it by then, it's going to lose 20% purchasing power. So they're going to program your money and they're going to make you spend it or lose it. That way they can control the economy even more. But what really worries me about this is that if my fat body wants to go to McDonald's and get a Big Mac, and then they realize that through my, digital, identity, they realize that, hey, your cholesterol was 212 last time you got some blood work. Maybe you don't need to go to McDonald's. But I really like to go to McDonald's, Lee. What if I want to go? Am I not free? Not if we have a CBDC and no cash. You won't be free to do what you want. People may think it is, but it's not. And like I said, it's going to come in the guise of helping the American people, and the American people will ask for it. I hope I'm 100% wrong. I hope that when they introduce this, that people scream and they boycott it and they want nothing to do with it. But human nature tells me that that's not going to be the case. There's enough people out there that are living from paycheck to paycheck, that are just hanging on to a thread, as far as maybe not being able to provide a roof over their family's head, not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. People will ask for that CBDC, and it will be the end of liberty as we know it in the United States, until the people are pressured enough and put into a corner enough that people as the majority do something about it. And I'm afraid of what will happen, because I like to study cycles, and we are now in the major war cycle. Meaning that it doesn't matter what kind of war. It can be a world war, it can be a civil war. It doesn't matter, but we are in the cycle of having a major war. And cycles usually pan out pretty accurately, within whatever specific time frame it is.
Yep. It's some interesting parallels. I know I mentioned Robert Prechter and his work with Elliott Wave and Fibonacci. I know we talked about this in the past. But one thing that he did was he tied social trends and events to stock market movements, and basically saying, like, it's all mass psychology. like hemlines, they go up when the market's going up, and they go down when they're not, and when they're going down, and vice versa. I'm sure you heard of the hemline index. But there's a few parallels between this time period and what was going on in the Civil War. One thing was the past few years, we had some renovations to the Capitol building, and those had not taken place since around the time of the Civil War. And then also, if you notice, beards and mustaches have become really the rage kind of with men all throughout the country. And you look at the Civil War photos, and all the guys are wearing beards and mustaches. So they weren't during the Revolutionary time, and they weren't during World War II. So,
well, I mean, looking back to the Civil War, also, really the Civil War, people confuse it with being a civil war because it's what the history books tell you, but it was really a war of secession. It was a war where half of the country roughly wanted to secede from the nation. And why was that? And the reason why is because these states, mainly the southern states, they were getting hemmed up by the government. They were getting taxed, and all of those tax dollars were going from their districts, from their states up to the north to support them. So they were getting taxed to death, and then those tax dollars were going somewhere else, benefiting somewhere else, and they got tired of it. Well, take a look at what's going on now. Now, I'm not political. I am what I consider myself apolitical, because I think both sides are pretty corrupt and both sides are no good. That's my opinion, so I don't get political. But if you take a look at what's going on now, a lot of the aid that is going on now is going mainly to blue states. And and it just happens to be that it's a blue party in the White House and in the Congress and the Senate majority, right? So all these other states that they feel that like they're getting bullied and they're being defiant against the government. And to me, that's a similarity as well.
The central government has definitely been pitting red state against blue state.
Oh yeah, that's their power. That is the power that they hold above us, is the illusion of choice. We think we have a choice when we vote. We don't have a choice. Whoever we vote for, we are electing the same government that they had before. They have the same agenda. I agree with
you. And that is also going on within the blue states, because as you probably know, having grown up in New York, the people in Manhattan and even the 5 boroughs and the surrounding counties are very, very different from the people who live upstate New York. Or, I mean, you have pockets of similarity in some of the major cities upstate, like Albany and Buffalo and stuff, but majority of New York State is farm country, and it's much more like a red state than it is a blue state.
I'll tell you what, Lee, those people that do live in the cities, I'm thinking that you mean like the cities, the populated areas, the concrete jungles, I guess you can say, they're going to have a very rude awakening, because I'm not saying that everyone does, but if they have a dislike for those people that live in upstate New York and for those people that live in the rural areas, that's where their food comes from. All right. New York City has like a 6 or 7 day supply of food. So those same people that they dislike are the people that actually produce. In New York City, can you tell me anything of value that is produced in New York City? Anything of value? And when I mean value is, I would like you to have.
I'll say this, Rudy. There are pockets of small manufacturing throughout the 5 boroughs, but the majority of Manhattan's business are law firms, insurance companies.
There you go.
Finance companies. So there's no production. It's all service industry, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm getting at is that if you live in a city, if you live in a populated city, look around. What of value is produced there? And when I talk about value, I'm looking at it from a preparedness perspective. So if you're ever at home alone, or when you're home, do a thought experiment. Sit in your living room, close your eyes, and imagine that the electricity went out and it's never coming back on. Then open your eyes and take a look at that big screen TV. How much value does that TV have to you now? Take a look at all of your electronics. How much value do they have to you now? Now take a look at that Berkey water filter that you have sitting on your counter. How much value does that have? Well, that would have a lot of value, right? Because you need clean water in order to stay alive, right? Now take a look at, if you are in the preparedness mindset, take a look at the buckets of beans and rice that you have put away for long term. That has an awful lot of value. take a look at your constitutional silver that you've been buying a little bit here and a little bit there throughout the years. That may not have a lot of value right in the middle of the crisis because people are hungry and you can't eat silver, which is true. You can't eat silver, but ask someone in Venezuela that's been going through a crisis, like, an economic crisis for what, 10, 12 years now? How much value does silver have over there? In Venezuela today, a family of 4 can eat for 5 days on 1 ounce of silver. And when I say eat for 5 days, I mean 3 balanced meals each person for 5 days. I don't mean rice and beans. I mean a balanced meal, 3 balanced meals. So that has an awful lot of value to them. So when you are living in a city, ask yourself, the lights just went out. Where is the value in this city? And
there are so many scenarios, Rudy, that could happen any time in any country in the world that would just devastate the cities because they are so dependent on the supply chain from outerlaying areas.
They are, and that's why I'm an advocate of being prepared, because you just never know when this is going to happen. Look, what is it, March 2020? The day that will go down in infamy when people were fighting for toilet paper. I wasn't out fighting for toilet paper.
Neither was I, Rudy.
I was sitting in my living room watching people fighting for toilet paper on my computer. Why? Because I have toilet paper put away. And I don't have a 20-year supply, but I know that I have enough to last me, a short-term crisis, if not almost a year's worth. I don't need to worry about that. Preparedness is about insurance. That is what preparedness is.
And Rudy, if you lived through 2020 and you didn't become a prepper of some sort,
then you're going to get what's coming to you. You deserve what's coming to you.
Absolutely. Right? I mean, I've always kind of had that. I think it's just passed down in my family because my grandparents lived through the Great Depression. So we kind of prepared. And I remember when I was a kid, my parents always had a stock of canned goods and stuff. So it's always been kind of a part of my life. But as the whole health crisis was coming, before it even came, I had just kind of got into more. And then I was seeing people in other parts of the country starting to hoard paper towels and toilet. And this is before it hit New York. So I went out right away. I hit the local wholesale store and I loaded up on stuff. And I'm glad I did because I didn't have to deal with any of that nonsense like some people.
Yep. I mean, it makes a difference. I remember one of my community members, she's from Denmark, and she emailed me, I think it was on a Saturday or a Sunday. And she said, I started listening to your channel a few months ago, so I decided to go out and get prepared. And she said, this Friday, which was a couple of years ago in 2020, she said on Friday, the government said that they were shutting down the entire country. And she said, instead of out there panic buying, I'm watching people panic buy on my computer. And she was saying, thank you, that instead of me having to be out there panic buying because I wasn't prepared, now I get to watch it on my computer because I don't need to do that. Not saying that it's good that people were panic buying, but the problem is, Lee, is that people will not learn. I think the one thing that humans are best at is forgetting history. That is the one thing that we are the very best at, is forgetting our history and then repeating those things that happened throughout history that were bad, that we shouldn't be repeating.
I think that has 2 causes to it. One, I think people live in the moment and they believe that society has evolved and we'll just never have to face those issues again. But then also living through the past 2 years, I've just been astounded at how easy people are manipulated in the media and how closed off they are to, because you and I know we follow a lot more sources of information than just the major networks. So, we're conscious of a lot of things that are going on in the world that the average person just has no clue. And you start talking about it and they think that you're nuts, and you can present any evidence you want. It does not matter.
Yeah. It's called normalcy bias.
Yeah.
It's called normalcy bias. People do not want to believe what's in front of them because it scares them and they don't want it to be true. And it's like I said, people are going to suffer, ladies and gentlemen. Get prepared now. I mean, what I don't understand is that when you propose to a person, hey, listen, just get a few weeks worth of food extra or a couple of months worth of food. They look at you like you're crazy. But what is it going to hurt? That's what I say. What is it going to hurt? The worst that can happen is that you need to use your food. The worst that can happen is that you need to use your preps. And the best that can happen is that you get to rotate them and save money in the long term, because inflation is going to continue to push the prices of those things up.
Yep. I know I went out and I bought a bunch of stuff that I have not used. It's kind of getting old. I know I'll probably have to throw some of it out because I won't eat it. My kids just won't eat it. But I'd buy it again just to have in case.
Well, let me tell you what. The first rule to preparedness when it comes to stocking food, I know that, look, I have all of this fancy freeze-dried food and stuff back here, and I love it. But the first rule is you buy what you eat and you eat what you buy.
Yep.
So even though I have fancy freeze-dried food that I love and I promote this stuff, I always tell my viewers, always start out with a full pantry before you venture out and get any third-party freeze-dried foods or dehydrated foods. Buy what you eat and eat what you buy. And once you have that system where you can rotate your foods, because you're buying what you eat. You like to eat beans? Okay, buy enough beans for a year and do a rotating system where every time that you are down one case of beans, you can go buy another case and put it in the back and continue to eat your food. But that's what you do. You should never throw away anything. You should never have to throw away any food.
You know, I bought I'm sorry. I bought some peanut butter and I bought some like macaroni and cheese pre-boxes just to have on hand for my kids.
I have good news for you.
What's
peanut
that?
butter lasts a very long time after the best buy date.
Okay.
As long as it is still sealed. All right.
Okay. Which it is.
I have peanut butter. I think we're on 2019 now. The peanut butter that's in my pantry that I rotate.
All right.
It's 2019 peanut butter.
How long do you think it's good for?
Well, the best buy date was in 2019. And here we are 3 years after 2019.
So you think at least 3 or 4 years after Best Buy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As long as it is sealed. As long as it still has the seal on it, you know, that little paper tab that you pull.
Yeah.
As long as it still has the seal and no air has been able to get in and out of it, it's still good. But of course, make sure that you check it before you consume it, you know, with anything else. But I have you know, someone made a comment once on one of my live streams saying, man, you must throw away a lot of food because I have a year's worth of food in my pantry. And I'm like,
oh, you don't. I mean, I stock up on beans, Rudy, and I stock up on rice and stuff. I go through that. I never throw it out. I know I'll use it. Yeah.
I've never had to throw anything away from my pantry because it was spoiled. Why? Because I rotate it. Yeah. And I know how to store it. There's a proper way of storing food for long term, and there's a proper way of keeping it in your pantry. For example, making sure that your pantry is temperature controlled. You don't want your food storage to be below, I say 50 degrees, all right? Many people say between 55 and 70, but I say 50 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. As long as you're in between those two temperatures and you don't have fluctuation in temperatures where it's really fast, so you don't want it to go from 50 to 70 in 1 hour. You know,
Rudy, before you go too much into detail on this, I'm assuming you have videos on your channel that our viewers can turn to and learn proper methods of storing food and like. So I
have all of those videos.
Yeah, I would refer people to your channel. It's an awesome channel. I mean, if you're watching now, you must like Rudy like I do. So just get more of him and his advice on his channel.
And let me say something really quick too, Lee, before you go. So it's not just about my channel. I am a big proponent of diversity, and not only in your preps, but in your information. So yes, absolutely. Go check my channel out. I have videos on I just put a video up today showing people how they can prep on the cheap, how they can put rice away for 20, 30 years, and it costs you almost nothing for the packaging, right? I have videos like that. I have videos where I show people how to prepare food from their prepping pantry. You know, I have videos where I cover the news, like you probably do as well. You know, you cover news items, but that have to do with preparedness. You know, I have an array of videos, but don't only listen to my channel. Go and take a look at other prepping channels as well, because someone else may say something to you that resonates with you better than I can. All right. And I may be able to say something that resonates better to you than someone else can. So don't get stuck on one channel. Shop around, but most importantly, get prepared, ladies and gentlemen, because we can make a whole nother video about this. But the next 10 years, the next 10 to 12 years, we are headed for rocky roads. We are on a train that is headed toward a wall, and eventually it's going to hit that wall. And the question is, are you going to be able to make it through that crisis? Because if you think the government is going to take care of you, then I'm sorry to tell you that you're wrong.
Yep, no doubt about that. Well, Rudy, I thank you for your time once again. I love talking.
Thank you.
You're a great guy.
Thank you for having me, man. I always have a good time when I come on here.
Hopefully
Anytime.
we can have you back in a month or two to kind of give us an update on what the hell's going on.
Yeah, we'll see where the world is then.